Hello artists! Today we're going to take a look at some basic acrylic painting techniques. I want to show you 6 different basic techniques that you can use to practice and try out when you're just getting started. So first things first, I've got a few different paint brushes here as well as a palette knife ready to use for mixing. I'm using just primary acrylic paints. These are actually some paints that were left over from an activity that we did in class yesterday, so I'm going to reuse the paint, and it's still got lots of life left in it. And over here on this palette where I'll be mixing, I also have what appears to be white paint, and in fact it is not. It is a gel gloss medium, and I'm going to use this for one of my painting techniques. So it is not a white paint, it is actually something that dries clear. You can use it as a coating over top of your painting when you're finished if you want to add a coat of gloss, or you can mix it into your paints, and it can create a couple different effects that we're going to take advantage of today. Okay, so similar to watercolor video, just going to start off with a really light watered down color and divide my page into 6 squares for the 6 different techniques. I'm just using a really thin white Bristol, because again, I'm just playing around with these techniques. I'm not trying to create some kind of finished masterpiece, so I'm not working on canvas. Okay, so the first technique that we're going to take a look at is called Impasto, and this is where you use the paint and you apply it fairly thickly to your area, and it creates a lot of texture. So you can see I've got my paintbrush quite loaded up with paint here, and I'm going to go ahead and start laying it down. This is a technique that was used a lot by the Impressionists, Van Gogh, Monet, big paintbrush strokes that you can readily see easily, and you can see the texture of the paint on the surface as well. The paint that we're using here is a medium body, so it does hold a bit of that shape, which is really nice. Okay, next technique that we're going to take a look at is called Graffito. Nice Italian name. Ciao, trattamento. Makes me feel like I am a better painter when I use the graffito. Okay, I could stop. Sorry, you know me and my ridiculousness. Okay, here we go. So, when you are using graffito, you work with paint that is still wet and pliable. So I've got a fairly nice little layer here of my crimson. And what you do, there's a few different ways you could do this. You could use any number of tools. I'm actually going to use the paintbrush itself, and I'm just going to turn it around and use some sort of a pointed object in the wet paint and create lines and textures by dragging it through the wet paint. Graffito has the root word graph in it, which literally means to write. So I am writing in the wet paint. Creates a nice sort of rough texture. Fun as well if you have, say, a base layer of paint first that is there, and then you lay a different color over top. You can reveal the color underneath with the graffito. Let's just zoom in a little so you can see the nice texture in the paint. Excellent. Okay. Now, our third technique that we're going to take a look at is Pointillism. Very familiar style if you are a fan of Georges Seurat. He used Pointillism. So this is the idea of using sort of small dots of paint, almost like the inking technique of stippling. And again, it depends on the size of canvas and the size of brush that you're working with, what size of dot you're going to work with. And you can take and actually blend different colors together by placing the dots close to each other, it can create a nice range of values. It can also be a way to blend areas of two different colors together without using the technique of actually blending the paint colors together. So you can see here I've got my areas of crimson, and now I'm laying in dots of my yellow color, and visually it's starting to create an orange. The two colors are mixing together. That's an interesting thing about Seurat's work, is occasionally he would use two different colors, very small dots close together, and the human eye would naturally blend them to create a third color. Like magic. Okay, so the next technique that we're going to look at is glazing. This is a technique that you can do with acrylic paint. A lot of people commonly associate it only with oil painting, the traditional form of glazing. So this is where my gel gloss medium is going to come into effect. I've got my gel gloss there. I'm going to take a small amount of my acrylic paint and mix in maybe a ratio of 2/3 of my glaze medium. It does, again, it's not a white paint, it does change the color slightly at first. However, when it dries, it will still be tonally the same. But the glazing medium creates a transparency so you can see now my blue is transparent, and I haven't had to thin it out with water. So it's nice if you're not wanting to simply thin out your paint using water. You can still apply your paint thickly, but it is transparent now because of the gloss medium that I've mixed in. Glazing, again, is a technique where you are adding layers of transparent paint on top of each other, and the colors underneath then are able to show through the transparent layers. Very common technique used by the Dutch masters to create those lifelike portraits that make the people look like they are breathing and they have blood flowing through their skin, and to make the apple look so real that you could reach out and take a bite. Okay, and the next technique that we're going to take a look at is the blend. This technique can be challenging at times. This is where you are trying to create an area of two colors blending into each other. This is nice when you have mixed, say, different tints of a blue for a sky. Perhaps you're trying to render something as being 3D. So here I'm working with my blue and my red, working with two different paintbrushes for each color, and working back and forth between the two colors, just blending that edge where they meet so that it is not a solid line, but instead a slow transition from one color to the next. So now you can see the blue moves into the red, and we have a bit of a dark violet color that is happening in between. Okay, lastly, our final technique that we're going to take a look at is the scumble. You may say to me, oh, this sounds really familiar, this looks really familiar. It's very similar to the dry brushing technique that we use in watercolor. So I'm working with a fairly dry paintbrush here. It hasn't actually got any water on it yet, and I'm going to work with my paint sparingly on that dry brush. In fact, I may actually want to just remove some of it from my paintbrush. And a scumble creates a rough texture on the surface. You can layer up different scumbles on top of each other to create interesting texture, again allowing different colors to show through the layers. It's an interesting way to create new areas of color as well. So you can see here, very rough texture, nice scumble, creates interesting areas of texture. Okay, so those are our 6 basic techniques. Don't forget, keep your water clean, keep your brushes clean, don't let them sit in the water for too long. Have a great day.